Welcome to this deep and unforgettable story. Today we will walk through the life of a young girl who never had the chance to grow into adulthood, yet her words reached the hearts of millions around the world. She did not survive to experience freedom, but she wrote about the life she hoped for. Her name was Anne Frank. This is not only a story of war, fear, and hiding. It is the story of a girl who chose hope while the world around her was on fire. A girl who used her diary as a way to keep her spirit alive. Even when everything outside was trying to destroy her, you will discover how the words of a child became stronger than any weapon. You will see how a single voice, even when forced into silence, can travel through history. And yes, this video is also perfect for learning English, because it is written in very simple language. With clear, emotional, and powerful lines, you will feel the story in your heart. And at the same time, your English will improve. So now, let us begin the story of Anne Frank. Anne Frank was born on June 12, 1929, in Frankfurt, Germany. She was like many other young girls of her time. She enjoyed laughing, loved talking, and was full of curiosity. Her full name was Anneliese Marie Frank, but everyone called her Anne, pronounced Anne. She had an older sister named Margot, and her parents were Otto and Edith Frank. The family was Jewish, but not very strict in religious practice. They were modern people who valued learning, kindness, and being part of society. Her father, Otto Frank, was a businessman who had served in the First World War. He was calm, thoughtful, and kind in nature. Anne felt a very strong bond with her father, something that becomes important later in her life. Her mother, Edith, was gentle, well-mannered, and deeply caring, although Anne often found it hard to fully connect with her relationship with her. Anne and Margot were very different from each other. Margot was quiet, thoughtful, and always well-behaved. Anne, on the other hand, was lively, outspoken, and constantly curious about everything. She was intelligent and did very well in school, especially when it came to writing. Even at a young age, her teachers noticed that she had a special talent for words. She dreamed of becoming a writer, a film star, or maybe both one day, but at the same time, a dark shadow was spreading across Germany. In 1933, when Anne was only 4 years old, Adolf Hitler rose to power, and life began to change rapidly. Hitler had deep hatred for Jewish people and blamed them for Germany's struggles. After the First World War, his political group, the Nazis, started creating cruel laws that slowly removed the rights of Jewish citizens. Jewish children were no longer allowed in certain schools. Jewish families could not run businesses freely. They were treated as outsiders in their own homeland. The Frank family sensed the danger early. Anne's father, Otto, understood what was coming and knew they had to act quickly. In 1934, the family moved to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, hoping to find safety there. Anne was only 5 years old when she left Germany behind. She had to say goodbye to her house, her friends, and the world she knew. In Amsterdam, Anne slowly began a new chapter of her life. For some time, the Frank family felt free again. Otto opened a business called Apekta, which sold supplies used to make jam. They settled into a quiet neighborhood and enrolled Anne and Margot in good schools. Anne quickly made friends and became known for her cheerful personality. She was always laughing, talking, and full of life. She loved reading books, watching movies, teasing boys, and telling jokes. Her teachers often said she talked too much, but they also admitted she was very clever. Anne felt that she was not meant for an ordinary life. She longed for excitement, freedom, and something more. She kept a notebook where she wrote short stories. She also wrote letters to imaginary friends, sharing her thoughts and feelings. She loved to dream about a kinder and more beautiful world. Her biggest wish was to become a well-known writer one day. But while she was dreaming, the world outside was changing once again. The Nazi army was spreading across Europe, and in 1940 Germany invaded the Netherlands. Anne was now 11 years old. The Germans took control and slowly, Life for Jewish families became frightening again. New restrictions were announced one by one. Jewish children were removed from their schools. Jewish families had to register their names and were forced to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothes. Jewish people were no longer allowed to visit parks, libraries, or movie theaters. Safety disappeared. Anne and Margot had to separate from their non-Jewish friends. With each passing month, Anne's world became smaller and more limited. Otto did everything he could to keep his family safe. But the danger kept growing closer. Soon there was only one option left: to hide. Then an event happened that made them move immediately. On July 5, 1942, Anne's sister Margot received a letter. It was an official order from the Nazis telling her to report for a labor camp. Everyone understood the truth behind those letters. Jews were not being sent to work. They were being sent to die. Otto read the notice, looked at Edith, then at his daughters, and spoke calmly but firmly. "We must go into hiding now." That same night, the family packed what they could. They wore several layers of clothing so they would not attract attention. They left behind their cat, their home, their furniture, and their neighbors. Early the next morning, on July 6, 1942, the Frank family vanished. No one knew where they had gone. That is where the true story begins. Because inside that hidden place, Anne would write words that would live on forever. On July 6, 1942. Just one day after Margot received the Nazi notice, the Frank family disappeared from public life. But they did not leave the city. Otto Frank had secretly prepared a hiding place months earlier, fearing this moment might come. It was located inside the building where his business operated. At 263 Prinsengracht in Amsterdam, behind a movable bookcase hidden from all eyes, was a concealed apartment. This small, shadowed space became their shelter. It was known as the secret annex. The annex was not a real home. It consisted of a few cramped rooms with little light, almost no space and no escape. They would have to live there quietly, unseen and unheard for a long time. Anne was 13 years old when she stepped into the annex. Just weeks before, she had received a special birthday present, a diary. It was red and white with a checked pattern, and she named it Kitty. From that moment on, she began writing in it almost every day. That diary would later reveal the truth to the entire world. The secret annex was not only home to the Frank family. 1 week after they went into hiding, another family arrived, the Van Pels. Herman Van Pels worked with Otto Frank. His wife, August Van Pels, often disagreed with Anne's mother. Their son, Peter Van Pels, was 16 years old, quiet, shy, and unsure of himself. Later, a dentist named Fritz Pfeffer joined them as well. Anne had to share her room with him, and she did not like him. In her diary, she gave him the name Mr. Dussel. Now, 8 people were living together in that small hidden space. No one was allowed to go outside. The windows could never be opened. The toilet could not be flushed during the daytime. Even footsteps had to be gentle, like whispers. They were hiding from death, and any sound could reveal them. Anne's life in hiding was nothing like a normal childhood. Every moment was controlled by strict rules. In the mornings, they had to remain completely silent. Office workers were downstairs, and even the smallest noise could expose them. They were not allowed to talk loudly, walk heavily, or move furniture. For hours they sat quietly, reading, writing, or lost in their thoughts. Their food was brought by loyal employees who worked for Otto Frank. 4 brave Dutch helpers risked their lives for them. Miep Gies, Jan Gies, Victor Kugler, and Johannes Kleiman. These people provided bread, potatoes, books, and news from outside. Because of them, the 8 people in the annex managed to survive for 2 years. In the afternoons, after the workers left the building, they could move around a bit more freely. Anne spent her time reading, learning new languages, writing stories, and dreaming about the future. But one thing she never missed was writing in her diary. Every single day she poured her thoughts into it. Her writing was truthful, emotional, and mature beyond her age. She wrote about the fear of being discovered, her arguments with her mother, her deep love for her father, her loneliness, her desire for freedom, and her feelings toward Peter. She did not simply describe what happened. She described how it felt. Her words sounded like those of someone far older than 13. She hoped that when the war was over, people would read what she had written. At first, Anne and Peter Van Pels did not like each other. Anne thought he was dull and too quiet. But as time passed, their relationship slowly changed. They were the only teenagers in the annex and both felt very alone. They began talking more often. One day, Peter kissed Anne. Anne wrote in her diary that he was kind and gentle, and that she wished he cared for her as deeply as she cared for him. They spent time together in the attic, looking at the blue sky through the window and talking about life and dreams. Still, Anne questioned H, so that small connection brought warmth to her long, silent days. While the world outside was falling apart, Anne's thoughts were growing stronger inside. She read books about history, philosophy, and politics. She followed the progress of the war closely. She imagined what her life could be like if she were free. She did not just want to exist, survive. She wanted to become someone. Anne once wrote, "I want to keep living even after my death. That is why I write." She truly believed that words could last longer than a human life. She wanted to turn her suffering into something meaningful and beautiful. Slowly, her diary stopped being just a private place for thoughts and became something greater, something she hoped the world would one day read. Inside the annex, there were no telephones, no internet, and no newspapers. Still, Otto and the others secretly listened to a small radio to hear news from outside. They learned that the Nazis were sending more and more Jewish people to concentration camps. They heard about bombs falling across Europe. They also heard that the Allies, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union were fighting back. Sometimes the news brought hope and made Anne believe freedom was close. Other times she heard that people she knew had been taken away and never came back. Each time her heart broke again. Yet she never lost her belief that peace would return. In 1944, a Dutch government minister who had escaped to London spoke on the radio. He asked people to save letters and diaries from the war so the world could later understand what had happened. Anne heard this broadcast and it changed her completely. She decided to rewrite her diary, improving it and shaping it into a real book. She gave it a name, The Secret Annex. She wanted the world to know the truth, not only about her life but about everyone who was suffering quietly. Every day she worked hard, rewriting, correcting, and dreaming of the moment people would finally read her story. But just when it felt like the war might soon end, tragedy struck. On August 4, 1944, after more than 2 years in hiding, the door of the secret annex was forced open. A Nazi officer named Karl Silberbauer discovered them. No one knows exactly how it happened, but someone betrayed their hiding place. Some believe it was a neighbor. Others think it was someone connected to the building. Even today, the truth is still unknown. All 8 people were arrested. The helpers were also arrested, but they were later freed. Anne's diary was left scattered on the floor, but Miepkes found it and kept it safe, hoping she could give it back to Anne after the war. Sadly, that day never came. Anna Frank, Margot, and Otto, Edith, Peter, the Van Pels family, and Mr. Pfeffer were all taken away. Their time in silence had ended. Now their final journey began. They were about to face something even more terrifying: the concentration camps. Anne was only 15 years old. She had lived in complete silence for more than 2 years. She had not seen trees, the open sky, or stars at night. Yet during that time she dreamed of freedom, believed strongly in hope, and poured her soul into her writing. And then within moments everything she knew disappeared. On that day, Nazi officers rushed into the secret annex. They discovered Anne, Margot, their parents, Peter, his parents, and Mr. Pfeffer. They were arrested like criminals. The people who had helped hide them, Miepkes and the others, were also taken into custody but were later released. Anne stood frozen with fear, her body trembling. Her diary lay on the floor. Her life, written in words, remained behind. She did not know it then, but the diary would live on. She would not. After their arrest, the 8 were sent to Westerbork, a transit camp in the Netherlands. It was not yet the worst place, but it was still a nightmare. The camp was overcrowded, loud, and filthy. There was no privacy. Guards shouted constantly. The food was spoiled and cold. Showers ran with icy water. Fear filled every moment, especially the fear of being sent east. East meant Auschwitz, and everyone knew what that meant. Death. Because they had been in hiding. Anne and the others were labeled as criminals. They were given the most exhausting work. Anne was forced to carry heavy stones. Margot had to drag wet mattresses crawling with lice. Rats and insects filled the living spaces. Every day was noisy, dirty, and full of despair. Still, Anne refused to lose hope. She continued to believe the war would soon be over. They remained in Westerbork for about a month. Then their names appeared on a transport list. It was the list everyone feared. On September 3, 1944, Anne and the others were pushed into a cattle train with more than 1,000 people. There were no seats, no food, no fresh air, and no light. Only cries, prayers, panic, and long silence. The journey lasted 3 days. No one knew the destination. Children collapsed. Elderly people died. People stood pressed together for hours without rest. Anne held Margot's hand tightly. Edith whispered words to her daughters. Otto stayed as calm as he could, trying to protect his family with his presence alone. At last the train stopped. The doors were thrown open. They had arrived at Auschwitz. Auschwitz was not simply a prison. It was a death factory. It contained gas chambers, crematoriums where bodies were burned, guard towers, and electric fences. Anne and the others stood on the platform as SS guards with guns and dogs shouted orders. Doctors pointed left or right. One direction meant life, the other meant death. Elderly people and children were sent directly to the gas chambers. Strong men and women were sent to forced labor. That day the group was torn apart forever. Otto Frank, being a man, was sent to the men's camp. Anne, Margot, and Edith were sent to the women's camp. Peter, his parents, and Mr. Pfeffer were separated as well. That was the last moment Anne ever saw her father. Auschwitz was surrounded by electrified barbed wire. Guards beat prisoners without reason. Dogs attacked the weak. Disease spread quickly. Hunger never ended. Fear ruled every second. No one was safe. Soap, no medicine, no kindness. Anne and Margot's heads were shaved. They were given prison uniforms. Thin, dirty, full of lice. No underwear, no shoes, just pain. They had to wake up at 4 a.m., stand for hours in the cold, and go to work in fields or factories. They were given black water for coffee and a piece of moldy bread per day. Anne became sick, but she tried to stay strong. She comforted other girls, told them stories, and tried to make people smile. Even in that hell, but her mother Edith was falling apart. Edith Frank was not strong like Anne or Margot. She was sensitive. She worried all the time. And now she was watching her daughters suffer. She gave her bread to Anne. She gave her scarf to Margot. She slept on the cold floor without blankets. In January 1945, just weeks before Auschwitz was liberated by Russian soldiers, Edith Frank died from starvation. Anne never got to say goodbye. In late October 1944, Anne and Margot were moved again, this time to Bergen-Belsen, another concentration camp in Germany. Why? Because the Nazis were moving prisoners away from the front lines. The Allies were getting closer, so they moved the girls to a camp that was less organized but still deadly. Anne hoped Otto and Peter had also been moved. She didn't know they were still in Auschwitz. At Bergen-Belsen, things were even worse. There were no gas chambers in Bergen-Belsen, but people still died. Every hour, every day, the camp was filled with filth. Freezing cold, no water, no toilets. Diseases like typhus, There were thousands of bodies lying around unburied. People died on the floor and no one came to help. Anne and Margot were covered in lice. They had no strength left to eat. They were cold, shaking, and too weak to cry. Still, Anne tried to give hope to Margot. But then one day Margot fell from her bed in the barracks. She couldn't get up. She died from exhaustion and sickness. Anne saw it happen, and after that she gave up too. After Margot died, Anne had nothing left. She was alone. She was sick. She had no idea the war would end just weeks later. She had lost her sister, her mother, her voice, her hope. In February or early March 1945, Anne Frank died of typhus just days after Margot. She was 15 years old. She died in a camp filled with death, pain, and silence. Her body was thrown into a mass grave. No stone, no name, no goodbye. But her words had already survived. The war ended in May 1945. The camps were liberated. The Nazis were defeated. But only one person from the secret annex came back. Otto Frank. He returned to Amsterdam alone. He waited for news of